Hey guys, it's Novaexplosion and Wildcat. We are back with the finale of the consoles, the games. I always forget the specific title, but you know what this is by now. We're in part 4. We have done every console from like the SNES all the way to, I think, the Wii U's where we ended last time, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right. So yeah, done every console. The order, well, it doesn't really matter. We did them all. So today we are just gonna cover 3DS, Nintendo Switch, and PS4. And it is very, it's a very, only 3 consoles. However, I have a lot to say on the PS4, and I think my boy Wildcat has a lot to say on the 3DS. So, it's gonna be quite a while, so we're gonna try to power through. This might be a longer video than normal, but we really don't want to have to make a part 5 on just one console. That's just kind of stupid, so,
Yep.
Yeah, pretty much. So, let's do, 3DS came first, right? So we would do 3DS.
Yeah, let's definitely do 3DS first.
Alright, well, I'm gonna start because I really don't have much to say on 3DS. But, yeah, I'll just go ahead. I don't really think I have a favorite game, so I'll just name a couple that I played on the 3DS that I really liked. I know Tales of the Abyss is a port. I'm just gonna mention it. It got a 3DS port, which was really cool. This was actually my first exposure to Tales of the Abyss, so that's really cool. I played I played Tales of the Abyss on the 3DS first, so just a quick shout out to that. They also gave Dragon Quest VIII a port to 3DS, which I played, and I played that recently on the channel. As for 3DS like exclusives, probably all I can think of that I really liked. I did like Project X Zone 2, which was a Project X Zone series, honestly. There were these 2 games called Project X Zone. They had Bandai Namco, Sega, and I believe it was... I forgot what else. It was Sega, Bandai Namco, and Capcom. Capcom, that's the one. And actually, Project X Zone 1 had Yuri and Estelle in the game. Really? So, yeah, it did. They're not really turn-based. They're like strategy RPGs, actually, and it's the crossover between all the games. They're strategy RPGs, but with like combo elements. They were actually really fun and innovative for the time. There was 2 games, and I know the first game, this was the first exposure I had to Yuri and Flynn. I had already gotten into Tales of because of Lloyd, though, but Vesperia was my second game, and it was because of this Project X Zone game that I bought Vesperia. They were in the game, and Flynn was in too. He was a solo unit, and then the sequel added, I think the sequel also had Yuri and Flynn paired up together. So the way this game worked, it was really interesting. They had like different pairings of characters, like I know like Yuri and Estelle were a pair, and then like a couple of other characters. I can't really remember. Like Ryu and Ken from Street Fighter were in the game. It was a bunch of it was like a bunch of crossover stuff, but it was kind of cool. And it was a neat concept. The only thing I could say is that it never got the English dub. It had just Japanese the whole time, which I kind of have I'm kind of negative towards games that have no English dub. Not really the game's fault. I just rather games have English dub. It's just a personal thing. But either way, the games were good. The second one more than the first because the first one, the levels dragged for too long. But the second one improved on everything, making the levels a lot more fun. And, it was just a good time. The story wasn't, like, much, but, it was a bunch of nonsense. But, like, just seeing the characters together was kind of cool. And, it just had a lot of notable, like, references to other games. Like, I know Resonance of Fate, I believe, was in the game. Zephyr and Leanne or something like that. I never played Resonance of Fate, but I know what that is. And there was just a lot of Street Fighter stuff and a lot of, Tales of his Bandai. So it was just a lot of good stuff there. So shout out to those 2 games, more the second one, because the second one was really, like, the best one. Another game I want to talk about, honestly, the only Pokemon game, I'm going to mention a Pokemon game just because I cannot think of anything else to save my life. But, ORAS, I don't think they're great. I don't think they're bad, though. I think they're fine. They're okay remakes of Ruby and Sapphire. I still think Emerald, I talked about this in the GBA version, I still think Emerald is, like, the absolute best Hoenn experience and Gen 3 experience, or just the Hoenn region experience. But ORAS are good enough attempts at trying to remake Ruby and Sapphire. They're definitely better than the originals, in my opinion, but they don't reach Emerald's level of excitement for me. But they're still okay games, and I find myself, I used to go back to them every now and then, probably won't now, but they're pretty good games, pretty good remakes of Ruby and Sapphire. And I'm trying to think what else. I feel like 3DS, like I'm just trying to think. I know there were a couple of games, but I personally cannot think of any that really got me. But That's gonna be it for me, honestly. The fact that I can't think of anything really means there was nothing for me. Because I just played a lot of DS games on my 3DS, or I just played Pokemon, despite, like, X and Y being decent to mediocre, and Sun and Moon being terrible. So, you know, that's all I really have to say on 3DS, I guess.
Alright, well, I have an official top 3 list for 3DS. I do have a couple honorable mentions first.
Alright, cool.
My first honorable mention is going to be Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance. I think that is probably like my third or fourth favorite Kingdom Hearts game. It was kind of cool that it had some monster collector elements. Instead of having you kind of team up with Donald and Goofy or Disney characters. Riku was also playable, which was really nice.
That was cool, yeah.
I do think that having the Dream Eaters as like kind of like an original monster sort of thing, like while it was cool, I think it would have been better if we had Spectrobes instead, and that was a way to kind of garner interest back into Spectrobes and get a Spectrobes
yeah, that would have
reboot.
been awesome.
But you know, hindsight's 2020, or well, I guess it's just like that's what I would have preferred. But yeah, it was a good game. It also has that kind of like enemy scaling sort of problem that Birth by Sleep did, but it was still pretty cool. I like Flow Motion. Flow Motion came back in Kingdom Hearts 3,
Yes.
but it's cool to just kind of like leap around all over the place. And then my other honorable mention is Monster Hunter Generations. I played Generations Ultimate on the Switch, as I said in the last video, but Generations is one of those Ultimate versions that doesn't add too much, so it's more like a port. And actually, in Japan, Generations Ultimate was on the 3DS and Switch, whereas internationally it was only on the Switch. But Generations Ultimate was a good game. It was kind of like, it was a 10-year anniversary title, so Capcom just kind of crammed in as many monsters as they could and said, have fun. So it's not the best to start off with. I still managed to do it just because I got more and more invested and I had a really good mentor. But it added, you know, as I said, it had just a ton of monsters. Added in a couple of really good ones that I love. There's a giant owl called Malfestio that I really like. All of the flagships from the Fated 4, I mean, I love. Astalos is okay. He's kind of growing on me in stories. But I really like Gameth. I really like Glavenus. I love Mizutsune. And then, of course, from Generations Ultimate, you also had Valstrax, which was the Elder Dragon. Really cool. And then you had the Deviants, which was just an awesome concept because it was basically like taking normal, popular monsters and making these like particular individuals that just through time and experience and aging, they just had become really powerful and knew how to deal with hunters and had these insane move sets that you really had to try and predict, and you could farm really good equipment off of them. So a lot of Deviants were really good, especially Bloodbath Diablos. And then the last thing I have to mention with Generations is the Prowler mode that allowed you to play as the Palico, as your cat, and you could customize that really well as well. Prowler mode is really fun. Very good for harvesting resources, even if you weren't a fan of the Prowler combat. I was a fan of the Prowler combat. I thought Prowler was really fun. But yeah, so those are my two honorable mentions. Number 3 for me is Kid Icarus Uprising.
Ooh, I should have talked about this one actually.
Yeah,
but you can go ahead.
Yeah, this is probably like one of the biggest reasons to get a 3DS, because first off, it's a fantastic combination of like an on-rail shooter and a JRPG with a very good cast, very good voice acting. It's made by Masahiro Sakurai, so it's engaging and ridiculous at the same time, and it really balances both of those elements. It's just very intuitive use of the control system for the 3DS to the point where it can be very infuriating at times. Now that I have my Circle Pad Pro, it's become a lot more comfortable for me because I'm left-handed. Because you have to you use one analog stick to move your character around, and then you use the stylus to aim and shoot. So it's a pretty intensive control scheme, and if you're left-handed, it just kind of stinks if you don't have the Circle Pad Pro. But really good game, and I think the story and the characters more than make up for how wonky the controls can be at times, and it's just hilarious. I mean, I can't talk about this game without not talking about Hades. Hades, first off, is a hilarious character from Disney and used extensively in Kingdom Hearts. But there's also another really good and hilarious version of Hades in Kid Icarus Uprising, and it is fantastic. There's actually also 3-on-3 PvP matches that you can do with friends online using the game, which I didn't know about until recently, but
Oh yeah,
that's
I had
really
no
cool.
idea about that.
Yeah, it's so you can like jump online with like 2 other friends and like fight 3 other people online, like all of you playing as Pit, which is kind of cool. And yeah, like the difficulty slider that is now in Smash Bros. That originated in Kid Icarus Uprising for the different levels. And then just the other thing is that it's Kid Icarus. We only have 3 Kid Icarus games. The other 2 are like really old. I think they're from the NES or the
Yeah,
SNES.
I think one's like the NES and the other one's like Game Boy or something. I could be wrong about the second one. I know the first one's NES for sure.
Yeah, but it's been like I think 18 to 20 years in between
Yeah,
the second one and Uprising, and since Sakurai already said that it's not getting ported to Switch and that he has no plans to make a sequel, we don't know if we're ever gonna get another Kid Icarus game ever again. And
yeah, truly
so
unfortunate.
it, which is a shame because Kid Icarus is a fantastic series and they could do so much with it. But yeah, if you're even remotely interested in playing Kid Icarus at all, like that is a must-have game, and it works really well on the 3DS in my opinion.
Yeah, I hadn't played Kid Icarus Uprising. I played it when it released, way back when, and then I haven't touched it since, so it literally slipped my mind, but basically agree with everything Wildcat said. I don't really have anything to add, but very good game. It was a great 3DS game, and a good, like, reboot, kind of, for the Kid Icarus series, but although we're not going to get another game, as Wildcat said, I don't think we're going to get another entry, but it was a great little, like, return to Kid Icarus and all that.
Yeah, is it like I would love another game. I just don't think anybody at Nintendo is gonna take that
Yeah,
risk.
I doubt it. I would die. I would love it. I did like Uprising.
Which doesn't make much sense because the game sold really well.
Yeah, like, I don't know, if a game sold, it's like, yeah, I figured they would just go on to make it, but I guess that's not how it always works.
But yeah, Kid
Unfortunately.
Icarus Uprising, great game.
Yes, possibly one of the best.
Yes. And then my number 2, this just very barely beat out Uprising, because I've been playing through it right now. But it is Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, which I would say is probably of the what I would call classic Monster Hunter games, which is anything before Monster Hunter World, is probably my favorite and the best one. Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, unfortunately, it was exclusive to the 3DS. And I am talking about 4 Ultimate because Monster Hunter 4 was exclusively released in Japan. So even though 4 Ultimate didn't add too much on top of 4, we just never got 4. But yeah, 4 Ultimate was kind of the first Monster Hunter game that started adding more of a story. I know not a lot of people really liked World's story, which I understand. But 4 Ultimate story was quite good and engaging. And it introduced a lot of really cool characters that people were very interested in because those characters, at least 3 of them, eventually made it into the recent Netflix short film Legends of the Guild. So you had Aiden, who was the main character. He was the Ace Cadet from 4 Ultimate. He also goes on to be in Monster Hunter World as the excitable A-lister. And then you have his master, the Ace Cadet, Julius, as well as Nadia, the Ace Gunner. So they're all in that movie. The movie's centered around them. And so if there's like little tidbits and information that kind of seem confusing to somebody that hasn't played Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, I really recommend you play 4 Ultimate because it explains a lot of the backstory that those characters have, and it is really well done. Also, just as a Monster Hunter game, it added 2 new weapons. It added Charge Blade, which is the weapon that Nova is currently maining,
Yes, of
and
course.
it also added Insect Glaive, which is a weapon that I like to use. I don't like it in Rise, and I'm going to get into this right now. But 4 Ultimate also added 3D terrain, so you could, jump up and down and climb around and things like that, which also added the ability to mount a monster, which is a feature that is not in Rise. But if you timed a jump or a fall and you landed on a monster's back, you would hang on and you would be stabbing it with a knife, and the monster would try to buck you off, and you could, do a little bit of extra damage. And if you hung on for that entire bucking period, it would knock the monster over and give your teammates a chance to hit it while it's down. And so that was replaced by the wyvern riding feature in Rise. But that made Insect Glaive particularly good, and I used Insect Glaive quite a bit in a lot of those other games in between 4 Ultimate and Rise because of that mounting mechanic, which I really like. New monsters, it did give us the amphibian class. So we got some cool amphibians like Tetsukabra and Zamtrios. We also had the Temnoceran class, which, Nova, you're probably not going to like the Temnocerans because they're giant spiders.
Oh, of course not.
But
Yeah, I don't
but
like
I
that you
love
mentioned that.
Nursilla. I really love Nursilla. There's not a lot of Temnocerans, but I really like the addition of Temnocerans. And then, of course, there's Gore Magala, which is one of the flagships, which is very critical to the story. So I'm not going to go too much into Gore Magala, but it's a really cool concept. And, we got a couple of new variants. We got Molten Tigrex, which is a really fun fight. Orochi Kirin, which is an Ice Kirin. That was really, really cool. And then with 4 Ultimate, we got a secondary flagship, which I think is one of my favorite monsters, actually, and I think it's super duper underrated in terms of flagship, but it's Seregios. So you don't hear a lot of people praising Seregios, and I really like his design. I think he's really, really cool, and he's a really nice fight. So 4 Ultimate really adds a lot, and it has probably the best story that we have in a Monster Hunter game, and I like that attempt to kind of bring a story to kind of connect all of your different hunts. It was pretty cool, and it wasn't, I don't feel like it detracted too much from the gameplay. I think the only criticism I actually have about 4 Ultimate is the fact that it is exclusively on the 3DS. So it's a really good game.
All right, and your number 1?
And my number 1, we're sticking with the theme of Monster Hunter. We are now on my positive rant about Monster Hunter as a franchise. But number 1 is the Monster Hunter spin-off series that has kind of taken the Nintendo community by storm recently. This is the prequel Monster Hunter Stories. Monster Hunter Stories is a fantastic game. It actually kind of, for me, it has a similar story with Pokemon Conquest, where I think at the time Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon had come out, and I don't insanely hate Sun and Moon. I think that Sun and Moon have a lot of problems, but I think that they were on the more difficult side, which I enjoyed, and I did like the story of Sun and Moon when it wasn't drowning you in exposition and cutscenes. But Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon just felt like a cash grab because it was basically the same game, but they just butchered the story to shoehorn in Necrozma. So I was kind of complaining about that to my buddy that got me into Monster Hunter because he played Pokemon as well. And he was like, "Oh, you should try Monster Hunter Stories because it's a monster collector, and I think you would really enjoy it." And I wasn't really into Monster Hunter yet at the time. So I kind of dismissed it, like, yeah, I don't think I would really like that. I'm not really into Monster Hunter. And then after I started getting into mainline with Generations Ultimate, I then kind of looked back at it and started looking at some gameplay footage. And I'm like, actually, this looks really good. I need to try this. So I eventually got it. And thank God I did. Shout outs to my boy Zan Falcon, because it is a fantastic game. It's probably one of my favorite monster collectors. Definitely my favorite 3DS game. One of my favorite Monster Hunter titles. I really enjoy stories as a concept more than mainline, which is saying a lot because I do enjoy mainline quite a lot. But stories, it's turn-based, but I think it handles the turn-based combat very well, and it is still quite a challenging battle system. And the animations, they recycle a lot of the animations from mainline, which are super duper high quality, and then they kind of change the textures to be more of a cell shaded art style like you see in Zelda Wind Waker and later in Breath of the Wild. It's that sort of art style, which looks really beautiful, and they did a really, really good job with it. And I think, a lot of people kind of have Stories 2 overshadowing Stories 1, but I think Stories 1 still has a lot of really unique features and quirks that make it a good game and still worth playing. For one thing, it's harder. The enemy monster patterns are less predictable. So you have to be paying a lot more attention during the fights. because most of the monsters don't just spam one attack tendency. So you have to be paying more attention. And then the other thing that I actually kind of wish was in Stories 2 was and you've kind of noticed this because you did a couple hours of Stories 2's demo, but
Yes.
when you use items, you can just use as many items as you have. In Stories 1, you had a battle pouch, just like you do in mainline Monster Hunter. So even if you had, let's say, 50 mega potions crafted, you could only use 5 of those mega potions in a battle. So it greatly increased the
Oh, so
strategy
they have like
that
an
you had.
inventory limit and such.
Yeah, so you had to customize your battle pouch as well, and so you had like a certain number of items that you could bring, and you could only use a certain number of that respective item per battle. So that made it, a lot more strategic. I think certain fights were just harder. I fought Kieran recently in Stories 2. Kieran was a lot harder in Stories 1. There's a post-game fight that has you fighting 2 Kierans at the same time, and that is definitely probably the hardest battle in the entire Stories series. Kieran is just not as threatening in Stories 2 because spoiler alert, in Stories 1, Kieran will attack twice every single turn, and then when Kieran gets mad, it attacks 3 times every turn. They got rid of that in Stories 2, so Kieran's less threatening, and so fighting 2 Kierans at once is very, very scary. And but I love the game. I think, the one thing that it kind of had going bad for it was the gene system. The gene system wasn't fully fleshed out, but they fixed that in Stories 2. So all props to Stories 2. The story is kind of basic, but it's good and it's complete. I'll get into the story for Stories 2, but I think like it's fine for what they were trying to do and it works. I think it's the conflict is quite interesting, and for a game that kind of has like a kind of chibi, sort of like trying to appeal to children art style, the game gets kind of dark. And like for example, and this isn't like a big spoiler or anything, but the game pretty much starts off with a berserk monster attacking your village.
Oh, it's wild.
So yeah, so it's just like, even though it's kind of got this little cutesy art style, like they go into a lot of like serious things and they don't shy away from anything, which is very Monster Hunter-esque. And I do really like that aspect of it. And I think the characters were good. I think that if you watch the anime, it develops a lot of the characters even further. So if you use the anime as canon, I think it makes a lot of the character arcs better. But I think the characters were overall quite fine. In the game, but the gameplay mechanic is where that game truly shines, and it only gets further polished with the sequel. And yeah, this game was fantastic. Highly recommend it. There is a free demo on the Nintendo eShop, and if you don't have a 3DS, they did also port it to smartphones. And it's actually half the price on smartphones. Instead of $40, it's $20, and it has better graphics. So that is always an option to play this game. I don't normally advocate for playing games on your phone, but because that is a complete game, go right ahead. It's really, really good. Definitely worth it. If you'd rather play it on your computer, you can use BlueStacks if you have an Android to play it on your computer. And the only thing that you're kind of sacrificing by not playing the 3DS version is that you're not going to get access to some Legend of Zelda DLC that gives you some new armor and weapon sets and allows you to get Epona as a Monstie. But that's about it. Really, it didn't do too well just because it was competing with the Generation 7 Pokemon games when it came out, and then internationally it came out in 2017, so the Switch had already been out for 6 months. So it kind of got overshadowed by those two factors, but in terms of gameplay quality, it is easily better than any Pokemon game on the 3DS. The animations are just well done. The overworld and exploration are really well done. The fact that you can just ride around on all the monsters that you have in your party, and they all have unique field abilities, just by riding them. They don't need to know certain attacks. Really, really well done. Monster Hunter Stories is definitely a must-have in my opinion for anybody with a 3DS.
All right, that's 3DS then. Very good. I've been talking to Wildcat. I'm looking forward. I'm gonna play Stories 2 sometime in the future, and by future I mean like probably the next few months or something like that. But you know, it's on the way. It is. I actually I purchased a copy of Stories 2 already, so I am official.
Ooh, this is new to me.
Yeah, I actually just did it yesterday after we talked.
Yeah, no, it's you definitely won't regret your decision. My thing with if you are considering Stories 1, I think obviously like there's a part of me that's like play Stories 2 first because Stories 2 is the better game overall, and I'll get into that later when we do Switch.
Yeah.
But I think that your enjoyment of Stories 1 will be higher if you play it first because there's going to be some mechanical comparisons that you'll make to Stories 2, but it's kind of whatever.
Yeah, I think I'll be fine.
They're both good games.
Yeah. Gotcha. But yeah, anyway, let's move on to PS4. PlayStation 4. I'll go first. So PlayStation 4, this is like mostly what I play on nowadays. So it was very hard to narrow down. I do have a top 3 for this because I haven't had a top 3 for like the past 2 consoles, but I actually do have a top 3 for this, but it was really hard. I have a ton of games that I want to talk about. So yeah, we'll get started with that. First of all, the Cold Steel series, very, very good games. I'm currently playing Cold Steel 2. I thought Cold Steel 1 was a bit slow, but Cold Steel 2 makes the build-up worth it so far. I'm like only halfway through, so I can't say much on that. Both very good games though, and I look forward to playing more of Cold Steel. Another game, Persona 5 Royal. You guys all probably know about Persona 5 Royal. Persona 5 and Royal, but obviously Royal makes Persona 5 like obsolete. Like with Royal existing, there's no reason to play 5. Really good story in Persona 5 Royal. I love it. I love the idea of like not your true self. That's Persona 4. But I like the whole rebellion theme they got going on. The characters are really neat. Some of the villains are okay, but some of them get good build up. But the confidant system is really neat too. I'm a big fan of like character arcs and stuff, and Persona 5 has a big focus on that with the confidants and even the gameplay. Like, I mentioned that Persona 4 Golden is one of my most beloved games, but the gameplay in 4 was just okay. 5 is really where the gameplay is, like, a ton of fun. They added a ton of stuff that made 5 just an overall, like, updated, better mechanical game. Like, baton passing was great, added a lot of strategy to the game, even though Royal is kind of easy. But, baton pass was fun. They had really good, just basically updated combat. I love it. And adding the weaknesses, like adding Psych, Nuke, and Gun especially, was a very good quality of life improvement compared to other Persona games. And music is also top notch. I love, possibly one of my favorite soundtracks is Persona 5. I don't think it's my all-time favorite, but it is definitely up there, probably top 3. I love some of the tracks they got going on, especially like Takeover, which is the main battle theme. Possibly the best theme in existence, like lyrical song. I love it a lot.
Takeover is really good.
I love Takeover. I'm obsessed with it. It's the intro to my YouTube. My YouTube intro is a part of Takeover. But yeah, very, very good track. I feel like there was something else. It looks beautiful. It's possibly got like one of the best art styles of every game. It's not like, you know, as graphically intense as FF7R, but like it looks gorgeous with the art style they did. Like just the portraits and the UI. Very nice use of red and black. So yeah. And also there's a sequel, Persona 5 Strikers, might as well mention it now, which isn't as good as Persona 5, but it's a hack and slash Dynasty Warriors ripoff of Persona 5. But it does a lot to like make it feel like an action RPG. It doesn't feel much like a mindless button masher. Like Persona 5 Strikers blends the elements of Persona 5 really well to make it a pretty good game. And yeah, it was a ton of fun. The story was good. It was like a retreading of 5, but they did really well with it. The 2 characters they added were kind of neat, especially Zenkichi. He was really cool. Sophia was okay. I just like characters that like gain understanding like that, but she was okay. Yeah, so Strikers was like a great way to expand on Persona 5. The only negative to Strikers though, it doesn't take the Royal canon, so there's no like Akechi and there's no Kasumi. So you know, it's not canonically a sequel to Royal. It's more canonically a sequel to Persona 5. But even then, still a very good game, and it does tone down on like the social link stuff. So I know like Wildcat said that he's going through 5 and finds like the confidant stuff to be like a little slow. But Strikers doesn't really have the confidant stuff. They have like a bond system, but even then, all the events are like in the story. So Strikers does a much better job with the pacing. It's also a smaller game, but it's a nice little spin-off of Persona 5 if you want to revisit the universe and get more of the characters, which I loved about it. Just giving me more time with the Phantom Thieves was really cool. So yeah, Strikers is good. I think I'm almost done. Trials of Mana Remake, another game I really like. I wasn't a fan of the original I played. I think they added it for the Nintendo Switch Collection of Mana because it was never localized. I was not a fan of the original, so I was kind of like doubting the remake. But then I played the remake because my friends convinced me that it's actually good, and I tried it and it was really, really good. Lots of quality of life improvements in that game, like adding a jump button and like just making it more combo focused compared to the original. The original just felt very, very repetitive in the gameplay, and making every character unique was also cool. And they had like 6 playable characters that you actually had to choose 3 of them, so that was really interesting. And while the overall story didn't change or anything with like the characters, but just seeing each of the characters had their own goals to go through. Like you would fight there were 3 different villains depending on who you chose. Like I think choosing Angela or Durand would give you like the Crimson Wizard as a villain. I'm not gonna spoil it, but so Angela and Durand would give you a villain, and then I think it was Hawkeye and Reese would give you a villain, and the last 2 were Kevin and Charlotte. They would give you a 3rd villain. So there were 3 different villains depending on who your main character was. And those pairings I mentioned actually have like a connection. So you could really do a lot, like mix and match with your team, which I really liked. And the class system was really neat. You can like go like on verging pathways. You can have a light class or a dark class. I could speak, but you can have that, and it was really cool. Just getting like different playability and stuff, like different paths to go down. It was really, really neat. And the rearrangement soundtrack was good. It's good graphics. It looks nice. It's not as good as like current games, but they did well with the graphics, I think. And they did really well at like remaking the world. And especially as someone who didn't like the original. They just did a lot to make this game more accessible because the original just felt very, very dated. And there's a demo for this game, so you know, if you're not sure, try out that demo. It's there's no reason not to try the demo to see if you'll like it. So yeah. But yeah, so there's a ton of games, honestly, for PS4, but I'm just gonna get into my top 3. So my 3rd place for PS4 would have to be, I'm gonna count this as this because it came out for PS4 first. Dragon Quest XI is gonna be my 3rd place, not 4th place. 3rd place is Dragon Quest XI. This originally released for PS4. It doesn't have all the features of Definitive Edition, but this came out for PS4 first, so listening to the rules we set, I'm putting this in the PS4 section. Dragon Quest XI is a great, great game, and Dragon Quest isn't for everybody. I know it's like way too traditional for some people, and that's totally understandable. I can understand that, but Dragon Quest XI is just a masterpiece in every sense of the word. It looks beautiful. It's got great characters. The story itself, while being simplistic, is interesting. There's actually like, I like the way Dragon Quest divides its arcs in the story. Like there's 3 acts in the game mainly. The beginning act is kind of just like, you know, taking it easy and like a whole like beating the Dark One and everything. But then Act 2 takes a turn for the worse, and there's actually like the world actually gets destroyed in Dragon Quest XI to a sense. So Act 2 focuses a lot on like people trying to keep their spirits up and trying to like recover from this aftermath. So that was really cool. But and the 3rd act is crazy. I'm not even going to talk about it, though, because of spoilers. But the 3rd act is crazy and involves some crazy shit that goes on. I don't normally curse, but that's just how crazy it is. So, yeah. Dragon Quest XI is great. If I had to, like, nitpick about something, the combat is a little too traditional. But other than that, it's a great game. It's got a great world to explore, a great side quest. The character builder feature is neat. As I said, the characters are amazing. And the music is pretty but, you know, can't have everything. And there's just a ton of content in it. And as I said, if you're playing Dragon Quest XI, I think they actually added Definitive Edition to PS4 now, so it's not exclusive to Switch. So I would highly recommend buying the definitive version on either PS4, Xbox if you're somehow an Xbox gamer, or Switch. So would highly recommend Dragon Quest 11. So actually, I just remembered Wildcat. Do you want to do like back and forth, just so I'm not talking so much?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually I opened up my drawer with all my game cases so that I can do a brief rundown.
Of course.
So I've owned my PS4 for a little bit over a year. So I have like a bunch of games that I'm either in the process of playing or I haven't started yet. So basically, I'm just gonna kind of like run through all of them that aren't in the current top 3 very briefly and just kind of say points. So starting off, Tales of Zestiria have not started yet. I know that it's not like a great Tales of game. However, when I listen to most people's arguments for why they don't like it, it's not so much that it's a bad game, but more that it's a weak entry. And I know that it just has information in it that is going to make me enjoy the next game that I'm going to talk about briefly, Tales of Berseria. Yes. I know Tales of Berseria is very consistently in people's top 3 Tales of games. I'm very excited to start it. I just want to have the maximum positive experience with it, so I'm going to play Zestiria first.
No, yeah, I agree.
Honestly, Berseria, out of what's not in the top 3, I could see Berseria getting into my top 3 PS4 games. It's just I haven't started it. Next up, Ark Survival Evolved. This one, it kind of came out on PC and in Xbox One first, but Ark Survival Evolved, I prefer it over Minecraft just because of the focus on taming and riding dinosaurs. It does have quite a bit of lag, and PvP is a nightmare because it's literally gang warfare. But if you're on a PvE server with a bunch of friends, it can be really fun, and just a lot of other dinosaur enthusiasts like myself, we really enjoy it. Next up, Red Dead Redemption 2. Did my education in Montana, so there's a bunch of funny and relatable stuff about the Wild West in it. So really like that, enjoying it quite a bit. Kingdom Hearts 3. This game is obviously it wasn't going to live up to all the hype, but I did enjoy it. It's probably, I would say it's around 3rd or 4th favorite alongside Dream Drop Distance. Let's see, Persona 5 Royal. Nova touched on this a bit.
Yeah.
You guys all overhyped this game, in my opinion, because it was one of the first PS4 titles I bought. But 5 Royal, it's a good game. I like the combat. I like the characters for the most part. I like exploring and infiltrating the palaces. I don't like the rest of the game. And that's just, it's down to play style. I don't like the social sim aspects and the free time and raising your little itty bitty stats and, oh, you need to have this stat at this height in order to go on this avenue. It's too much.
Yeah, it's not for everyone. I can agree. I could definitely
Yeah.
see people not liking it because I expected not to like it as well, but then when I finally got into it, it was yeah, surprisingly it was okay for me.
So that's just a huge roadblock for me because I like everything else about the game. And then my other thing is just I'm kind of, I really like monster collecting RPGs, and people kind of touting it as a monster collecting RPG seems kind of false because 1, there's a much greater emphasis on the human characters, and 2, this just kind of has to go with how I feel about SMT creature designs. They're not monsters. They're
like
spirits,
mythological
they're people.
stuff.
They're not animals. And to me, a monster is an unknown / powerful type of animal. That's why I really like Monster Hunter monsters. So that is also just kind of something that makes it harder for me to continue playing the game. It is a good game. It's just not the perfect game for me.
Yeah, I can agree. I don't even think it's the perfect game either, but I do hold it in high regard.
Next up, Fairy Tail. Big fan of the anime and the manga for Fairy Tail. The game I had high hopes for because it was going to be an RPG, not an arena fighter. The combat system is pretty darn fun, I'll be honest. The rest of the game is bad and it's rushed. Definitely not worth full price. If you can find it super duper on sale, it's kind of, a nice thing if you just enjoy the IP. But other than that, it's it's okay. Scarlet Nexus, haven't started that yet. That's another one that it's going to take a while before my backlog's done. And then finally, Tales of Arise. I did start Arise because I was like, it's a Tales of game. I want to start it. So I put in like 2.5 hours into it. It's a good game. Don't get me wrong. I like the combat for sure. I'm not huge into the story. I'm not overly fond of the characters that have been introduced. So I think it's probably going to be middle of the pack for me in terms of Tales of games, at least so far. That's just a prediction. And I don't like that the skits use the 3D models instead of 2D art because they have less personality.
Fair. Really quickly, while we're talking about Tales of Arise, my experience with Tales of Arise, fairly in the game, 30 hours in, phenomenal, possibly one of my favorites. The skit thing grew on me, and the characters also grow on me, but I'm also not going to say too much on that because Wildcat is not very far in.
Yep, and I am a huge fan of the fact that you forge weapons, and I assume later on armor out of monster parts. That's really, really cool. So yeah, number 3 for me, after doing that big rundown, number 3 for me is The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. And that was another reason why I wanted to play Arise, was to see if I thought it would beat out Witcher 3, but it doesn't. Witcher 3 is really, really good. Fantastic RPG. It has a lot of really good mythological elements from Poland and other Slavic cultures. Very, very well done. It's a really cool sort of medieval setting that I really like. The combat is really fun. It kind of, with the role that a Witcher plays, it's very similar to Monster Hunter in that regard. Like, you do hunt monsters, but if anybody's had trouble getting into Monster Hunter because of the combat system and how it can kind of feel very sluggish at times, I highly recommend Witcher 3. Witcher 3 has a very much faster paced combat system that is more akin to most hack and slashes. It's not super duper hack and slash, like fights can get challenging, but it is a really fun combat system that I want to get into more. The game is just littered with side quests. So if you love side quests and you love open world exploration that leads into having just tons of side quests, you're going to be very, very happy with the game. Even the main story and the characters are really well done. I love the horse you have. You have a specific horse. Her name is Roach, and she is great. Whenever you whistle for her, she will teleport anywhere. She's got your back. And yeah, I mean, there's not too much that I haven't progressed super duper far, but it is just a really, really good experience. The soundtrack is fantastic. Hopefully Nova will put a couple of the Witcher 3 songs in for this segment, because there are some really, really good songs from this soundtrack available for it. And
I will keep that in mind for this video.
Yeah, and then the last thing, I can't talk about Witcher 3 without talking about Gwent. Gwent is basically like a Magic the Gathering combined with war, like, card game that you can optionally play throughout the game with different NPCs. And I know several friends of mine that probably have more hours of their saves spent playing Gwent than actually playing the game. So Gwent can be kind of addicting at times. So it's definitely nice, because not only are you getting a full-length action RPG, but you're also getting a card game thrown in the mix. So Witcher 3, really, really good.
Yeah, and as you were listing those games, I forgot 2 specific games that I wanted to mention that were not on that list, so I'm going to just mention them really quickly. Dragon Quest Heroes 2, I adore that game, because I just got the platinum in it. It took me like 160 hours. Very good experience, although a bit grindy. Very good fan service for Dragon Quest if you're a fan of the series. The other game I want to talk about is Horizon Zero Dawn. I adore this game, and I'm looking forward to the sequel. And I'm really looking forward to replaying this for the channel. I think that's probably next on my list once I make more progress in the Rise. But yeah, Horizon Zero Dawn is a great game, great world to explore, possibly one of the best protagonists, in my opinion. And surprisingly good story. So great game, Horizon Zero Dawn. Number 2 for me. It's kind of these 2 games are basically really close, but this is my number 2, Tales of Berseria, which is what Wildcat mentioned, but I'm gonna go in depth, obviously not spoil. But I
Thank
will,
you.
yeah, I will talk about Berseria, about why I love it so much. I'll be as vague as possible though, because and plus I did the tier list video, so my thoughts on Berseria in depth are in there. But yeah, Tales of Berseria is phenomenal. I just like it. Honestly, I ask myself, do I like Grace's F or Berseria more? I say Grace's F, but honestly, the amount I love Grace's F more, it really doesn't beat out Berseria by much. Honestly, sometimes I feel like exchanging that and being like, yeah, Berseria is my favorite, just because Berseria just like Grace's F is pretty lighthearted for a Tales of game. Not super. It's obviously focused on comedy, Grace's F, while Berseria is a much darker game. And now Arise is looking to be a really dark game as well. But Berseria is like much darker than any Tales of game we've gotten up to Arise. Like there has not been a game that's really been that dark since Berseria. I just think Berseria has a really good plot. It's got my favorite plot in Tales of. Can't think of a Tales of plot. Only Zillia. I would probably say Zillia would be my second favorite Tales of plot, but Berseria is definitely number one for me. It's got such a great plot, a great cast of characters. I love them all. They are all great. And the skits and the interactions and everything are just so good and so hilarious. And Maggie Lou's over the top a little bit, but I still love her. But yeah, great game. Combat's good. I do like the combat. I don't think the combat's like the best in this series, but it's good enough for me to say that the combat's good. It's not bad, which is good. When you're playing a video game, you don't want the combat to be bad. So the combat's good. It's playable. It's not my favorite combat system, but playing Berseria makes me just... Combat's good. I enjoy it. I love the break soul system's neat, and the soul system is kind of hit or miss, I know, but like I'm fine with it. It's okay. Not as good as like Grace's F's L system and Zillia's linking, but it's good. I like it. I enjoy the bit. Music's on the weaker side. I definitely think the music's like not bad, but I can't really remember much good tunes about it. But you know, music's there. It's pretty good. And as Wildcat mentioned, I do think playing Zestiria first increases your enjoyment of the game. While Berseria does a great job at like being its own story, I can't recommend enough playing Zesty first. I definitely think I would have enjoyed Berseria without Zestiria, but I definitely think that knowing certain things about Zestiria made Berseria better. It improved the game for me. Well, I think Berseria would have been a fine game without it, but you want that maximum enjoyment, I think, when you're playing Berseria. So it's just a great time. And honestly, without going into spoilers, that's all I can really say. I just really like the characters in the story, which are really, really strong in Berseria, and the interactions are really strong, and the combat's good. Just great stuff. I love Berseria. It's a great PS4 game, great Tales of game, one of the best, honestly. You can't get better than it.
Yep. And then I also remembered that I forgot to do 2 honorable mentions because I played them on Switch. Digimon Cyber Sleuth and Hacker's Memory. Only Digimon games that I've played, but they were quite good. Digimon has a bit of a problem, especially with the Mega and Ultimate level Digimons for me, in terms of design, kind of like with SMT, where they get super duper humanoid. And Digimon also has the problem of making them like really mechanized, and it's just like I'd rather have an animal than, you know, a mech suit, or, you know, a person in a suit of armor. So that kind of detracts it a bit, but the story really carries it. It's definitely like, if you're looking for a monster collector with a very in-depth story that still doesn't like detract too much from the fact that you are a monster tamer, it's very good, especially Hacker's Memory.
I agree.
But yeah, they weren't enough to make the top 3 list for me. So going into my number 2 is Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Yeah, we'll go more into that.
Yeah, Final Fantasy VII Remake is really good, and this is coming from somebody that hasn't played a single Final Fantasy game. But just with 7R, I really like the conflict and the story. I think that's very interesting. I really like the characters. I know that I have been spoiled that for Remake, it's basically the first 6 hours of the original game, like, lengthened into a 40-hour JRPG.
Yeah.
So I know it's not a complete storyline, And I haven't gotten super duper far into it, but I love everything that I've had so far. I really like the combat. I like the ATB mixed with the actual real-time physical fighting style. I think that it's a really cool and unique combination, and all the bosses that I've fought so far, even on normal difficulty, have been quite hard. So that's made it quite a bit enjoyable. I like all the characters. I think Barrett is really, really cool, and whoever does his voice is very, very talented and passionate about the role.
Yeah, that'd be I think his name's John Eric Bentley or something like that. Very
Yeah,
good.
I
Very
know
good
his
voice.
name. I know it's John something.
Yeah.
So, but he did a fantastic
Yeah, great work.
job.
He does great work.
And then I have been spoiled that there is a spiky-haired lion boy, and I know he's not playable, but he should be playable in part 2 from what I hear.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I am very excited to finally meet said spiky-haired lion boy. And yeah, if there's any way to make me enjoy a game a little bit more, it's throwing in a dog or a lion or something like that. So good props on FF7R, and it's a fantastic game that I definitely look forward to finishing.
Yeah, my number one is Final Fantasy VII Remake, which, as I said, Berseria and this game are really close to each other, but they're both in my top 10 games of all time, as well as Dragon Quest XI and Persona 5 Royal. But yeah, so Final Fantasy VII Remake, again, I'm not going to spoil it because of Wildcat, who has not played it, but I will talk about what I think of everything. It's perfect, honestly. The story's really good. I love the plot line. I know a lot of people say like, oh, it's not like the original and all that, and I say screw it to them because it's a good game. And the changes they made aren't necessary because, you know, I don't think they needed to make the changes they made, but you know, they did, and I think it works well. It works well for the universe, and whatever you think of Final Fantasy VII Remake, if you think of it as a sequel to FF7 or a reboot or a remake, whatever you think of it as, it's a good game. The plot is really well done. I love what they do, like with Cloud and Tifa and Aerith, and seeing all of them together is just great. Like, because especially someone like me, I played the original. Like, I have a lot of experience with the original, and the original isn't held in like my favorite games of all time. It's not even held in my favorite Final Fantasies. I think it's like my 5th or 6th favorite of all the Final Fantasies I've played. However, 7 Remake just does such a great job at expanding FF7 love. Like, the way I love FF7, Remake expands it. And definitely the thing I liked about the original was the story. It was the best thing. And while I felt like the characters, it's a 1997 PS1 game, so the characters weren't that deep. But 7 Remake does so good, and it does so good with the characters and story. The gameplay is a ton of fun. It's one of my favorite combat styles, which is basically tied. At this point, I think Arise could be one of my favorite combat styles as well. But for now, since I didn't finish Arise, 7 Remake is my favorite combat system. It probably will be my second if Arise does beat it out. But 7 Remake is great. And yeah, combat's just a ton of fun. Characters have different play styles. I enjoy playing as all of them. And yeah. Red 13 will definitely be playable in part 2. I think it was great that we even saw him in this part, so that was really neat. The fact that he's in the game. I won't say when he is, but he's in the game because Wildcat already knows that. So, you know. But yeah, great music too. The music took a while to grow on me. But yeah, it's just great. I enjoy the soundtrack a lot more than I ever did. It kind of grew on me a bit, and I just enjoy it a lot more than I ever did before. It looks beautiful. It's gorgeous, and the way they put Midgar in like full HD was just phenomenal. It was really nice to go through Midgar, and the side quests are they're not amazing, but they're surprisingly not boring. So that was definitely good. I did enjoy doing the side content, and fighting summons and doing all the optional stuff. Very, very neat. Very, very top tier game, honestly. And I know a lot of people are hesitant on buying it because it's not the complete FF7 experience, but honestly, this game is a complete game. Like, it's complete. The storyline's not complete, but it's a game. It's complete. I still think it's worth a shot. And in case that didn't convince you enough, there is DLC, which is for some reason only included on PS5. But if you have a PS5, would highly recommend getting the Yuffie DLC because that is even, like, it's great. It just expands on what 7 Remake did, and Yuffie's a ton of fun to play with, and it just adds to the FF7 Remake canon. And yeah, it's a ton of fun. Possibly, it's my second favorite game of all time, just under Grandia. So it's a really good game. I love it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it more. It's just backlog, you know how it is.
Yeah, understandable.
Um, but yeah, so my number one for right now is Monster Hunter World, and this game I will also be including the Iceborne expansion within that as a whole. They're packaged together. I haven't gotten to Master Rank yet, which is where Iceborne content really starts kicking in, but I have played around with the Clutch Claw a little bit. I'm not a huge fan because I main Hunting Horn, for those of you guys that don't know. But I might try Hammer because I have wanted to try Hammer for a bit, and I've heard that Hammer is really good with the Clutch Claw. But Monster Hunter World is the best mainline Monster Hunter experience. Like, yes, classic Monster Hunter games have some of their perks. Like, yeah, it's good to go back to try you and do some underwater battles, or experience the story of For You, or go to Gen U so I can play as a cat. There's perks to every Monster Hunter game, but World is just, and it definitely lives up to its title. It is a game that kind of took a formula where you had all these different biomes and locales, but you had individual loading zones for all these different mini zones within the map, and it seams that all together and makes it feel like this full world that you are exploring, and you are much more actively tracking the monster before you hunt it, so it feels like you are a genuine monster hunter, and you are seeing how this creature lives in its environment and interacts with other monsters, and it genuinely feels like a hunt. That's one of the biggest positives to this game, and that's something that you haven't really experienced in Rise Nova, because your owl companion shows you immediately where all the monsters are, even if you haven't seen them before. There's a question mark on the map. So I think that I really love the tracking system that they implemented in Monster Hunter World. I think that it makes you more excited about it, whereas in older Monster Hunter games, it was just kind of a pain to find out where the monster was. So I really like the tracking system. The game looks beautiful. The story's all right, but I still think it is nice to have a story. I think that there's definitely moments where your interest kind of dips in it, especially with a lot of the Zora Magros quests, which I won't go into too much for spoilers. But it is really cool, and just the way that they kind of like added in some things, and it actually connects to Legends of the Guild a little bit, because basically, this isn't a spoiler, but the reason that you've traveled to this new continent to assist the guild as a A-list hunter is because there's some unknown mass migration of elder dragons, which elder dragons are basically like legendary monsters that have lived generations, and they have the destructive power to annihilate an entire city or civilization overnight. And there's been this mass migration of elder dragons to this new continent, and you're trying to figure out why it's happening. So it is taking a bit less of a hunting centric role and more of a biologist centric role, and you're kind of exploring and making all these discoveries, and that kind of plays into all the monsters have different sizes, so you'll fight like different members of the same species that'll be like a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, and so you have this crown size system, which is really, really cool. All of the hubs are really cool. You have like Astera, which is kind of like built out of like all these old ship parts, and has like these like winches and lifts that take you to different levels. That's really cool. I haven't explored the Iceborne hub yet, but I've heard really good things about it, and it's really well done. We started getting those HD cutscenes of cats cooking you food that make your mouth water because it looks really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, the game's fantastic. It's definitely slower paced than Rise, but I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. Yes, I do love the Palamutes, but it's not everything, and I think it's still a combat system that you can really enjoy. It's got a couple of really good crossovers with other IPs. There's a Witcher 3 crossover that's insanely well done, where you actually get to play as Geralt, which is really, really cool, and you get to fight the Leshen, which is one of my favorite monsters from The Witcher 3. And there is a Final Fantasy crossover. Which Final Fantasy game is Behemoth from?
It's from all the games. It's just a classic enemy.
Okay, you get to fight Behemoth in Monster Hunter.
Oh, that's one of my favorite monsters.
You're going to have a painful time.
I mean, I'll have enough.
Behemoth is not fun.
I will have enough fun watching it, but I see what you mean, kind of.
Yeah, the Monster Hunter format, he's hard. And then there's like a super duper like powerful variant of Behemoth as well that's even worse. So, but yeah, no, there's some really good fights. Obviously, I have to talk about some of the new monsters. Nergigante, the flagship, really cool Elder Dragon. In terms of personality, he reminds me a lot of Godzilla, which I really like, and I'm not going to go into too much else because that's spoiler territory. But Nergigante is definitely a huge fan favorite. There's a couple other minor monsters like Puke that I really like, Anjanath, even just like Great Jagras, like some of the lower tier ones were quite cool. Legiana was a really cool one. I like that one a lot. And then even some stuff that was added in Iceborne, like Banbaro and Beatotus. Iceborne brought back a lot of old favorites like Tigrex and Brachydios and Nargacuga. And then, you know, it started having kind of an end game sort of thing where they started adding in a lot of really tough Elder Dragons. I think Base World added in Lunastra as a title update, and it was really good because it separated her from her male counterpart Teostra, and she got a lot harder. It's one of the more difficult fights, but I appreciate them changing that fight. And then with Iceborne, I haven't gotten to it yet, but towards the end of Iceborne, there are some pretty intense fights with two of the most famous black dragons. You have Alatreon that was introduced in Tri, which is a very tough and sophisticated fight that was implemented really well. And then, of course, the big bad himself, Fatalis, the biggest big bad black elder dragon that we've ever had. And they do just a fantastic job with setting up his introduction in the story, because I have watched the cutscenes and everything, so I know how they introduce Fatalis in Iceborne, and it was just done in a fantastic manner. Even bringing back some other old favorites like Devil Joe and Rajang. You haven't fought Rajang yet in Rise, but Iceborne Rajang is
brutal.
I'm not looking forward to fighting Rajang in Iceborne because I've heard it from people. He's really tough, and he punishes you for doing the right things.
Oh, joy!
Which you just don't like. But yeah, Monster Hunter World is definitely like the most definitive Monster Hunter experience. And if anybody has a PS4 or PS5, Xbox One or whatever the new Xbox is, or PC, it's a must-have. It's, you know, it really brought Monster Hunter to the mainstream, and it did that for a reason. It's a very well-designed game. Very fantastic.
Yeah, it's on sale a lot. Like, I noticed it on PS Plus, so World is something I'm gonna have to check out when I get sick of Rise, which I don't see that happening for a while. But you know,
yeah.
And stuff.
World has way more content than Rise. Like,
I've been told.
Like I know we still have to beat Magnamalo, but Magnamalo is like the halfway point-ish. So there's not like too much. I mean, I think like most of it is just gonna be like monotonous grinding to get you like higher up in rank, like re-challenging a lot of monsters. But there's not too much in the end game, which is the biggest complaint with Rise, and we'll get to that in a little bit.
Alright, so yeah, Nintendo Switch. Alright, so yeah, I might remember to trim that out. I hope I will, because I'm going to edit this literally after we're done. So anyway, Nintendo Switch does not have many games like that aren't ports. Like, it has stuff, but like I cannot think. I'm not sure if this is the same for you, Wildcat.
No, it is the same, because basically like Digimon Cyber Sleuth Complete Edition I was considering, but that's a port. Vesperia Definitive Edition, port. Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, port. Generations Ultimate is a port. Tropical Freeze is a port. Like, games that I've already talked about and have been on lists for other titles. You know, like the only things that I could really think of that weren't ports were I had Smash Ultimate, which like is multiplayer, so I kind of been steering away from multiplayer games because it's like you need to have other people with you to have a full enjoyment of the game. But yeah, no, I do have a very easy 1 and 2, but that third one was just really hard. Yeah. Maybe SMT5, you know?
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, that's cool. So yeah, there's not really going to be like a definitive top 3 for this, so there might be only 2. but I will go first. I'm just gonna talk about some games. I have a number 1 because it's actually a Switch exclusive, so I'll talk about that later. But I want to mention Smash Ultimate, a very good Smash game, possibly the best Smash experience, definitely without a doubt. Bringing back all the characters was really cool. It was really neat. And I didn't talk about Smash Wii U and 3DS because I don't like them very much. I don't think they're very good games, honestly, but, you know. I know they added Cloud first, but playing as Cloud in Ultimate is much better just because Ultimate is a better game. Also, just adding lots of characters, like adding Dragon Quest was wild. Like, I did not see that one coming. And Joker, that was like crazy too, but yeah, Ultimate.
I was so hyped for King K. Rool, man. Like,
Yeah, that was
love
also
King K.
good.
Rool.
Yeah, K. Rool was nice. Yeah, so yeah, great characters. They added a lot of crazy picks for Smash Ultimate, so that was great. Smash Ultimate is a good game. Not much to say on it. It's just Smash, you know, classic Smash. Play with friends. It's a ton of fun. The story mode's trash, but other than that, very good game. That's all I have to say on Ultimate. Switch does have a lot of ports. My Switch library consists mostly of ports or games that, yeah, ports of other games. Like Dragon Quest XI S was a port of Dragon Quest XI, so I talked about Dragon Quest XI already. The Grandia HD collection, that was like wild because I did not see that happening. But 2 of my favorite games on the Switch is really cool. A ton of Final Fantasy ports were added. Shin Megami Tensei was originally a PS2 game, but I played it on the Switch. Very good game. But yeah, I can't think of any Switch games, so I'm just gonna get this game out of the way, which is the only Switch exclusive I can think of. So this game is no other than Fire Emblem 3 Houses. I'm not a big Fire Emblem person. In fact, my Fire Emblem history is very small. I played Path of Radiance and Awakening. I never finished either of them. And they were okay, they were good. I just was never a big Fire Emblem person. But then people started recommending me, like, yo, you have to try 3 Houses. And I was like, I don't know. Because I wasn't really big on Fire Emblem, not because the series is bad or anything, just not for me. But I tried 3 Houses. I played it, and I loved it. I was hooked to it because I know people who don't like social sim stuff, especially Wildcat, who said that Persona 5, the social sim part, was kind of a drag. 3 Houses might not be a good contender because 3 Houses has a lot of... It's kind of in a school setting. It has a lot of exploring the monastery and talking to your students, giving them gifts and all that, and getting to know them through support ranks. So it has a lot of that. But I like that kind of stuff. So this is definitely my kind of game. Something I liked about 3 Houses, the house system, choosing your own house, like Golden Deer. Golden Deer is the best house, by the way. Golden Deer, Black Eagle, Blue Lions, all great picks. The characters are just really, really good. I enjoyed them a lot. I enjoyed going around the monastery. I enjoyed the monastery bits. I know some people didn't, but I enjoyed going around and talking to my students about like the current situation and how their thoughts were on the war and like everything that's going on. I thought it was really cool. It did drag a bit, but I did like it. Doing the different activities, fishing is really fun. Arise has better fishing now because Arise is now really, really good. But you know, 3 Houses fishing was good, but there's just a ton to do. Like tons of stuff, tons of exploration in the monastery, which was really good. I wasn't really a fan of tactical turn-based, but now I'm like a fan of tactical games, and I want more because 3 Houses did tactics so well. It did tactical combat really, really well. And having something like permadeath in Fire Emblem is kind of annoying, so 3 Houses having a system that basically counterattacks permadeath is amazing. Like, I know a lot of people say Divine Pulse makes the game too easy, but honestly, like, I'd rather have it. Like, you know, having an option not to have permadeath characters is nice because I would not be able to do permadeath. I'm just not a fan of that, so it's nice that they made Fire Emblem... I don't think this was the first game that did that, but it's nice that they made Fire Emblem more, like, newcomer-friendly without the permadeath because I feel like that's what steers people away from the series a bit. But, yeah. Combat was really good. Monster fights were really nice. As I said, the houses are good. The characters are good. The story's pretty okay. It definitely depends on what house you pick for the better story experience, but either way, the story's just there. This really is about the characters and the world building, which I think is really well done. And it's just a fun game. And soundtrack is great. Possibly another one of my favorite soundtracks of any video game ever. And yeah, it deals with a lot of good themes in the plot, like especially the Golden Deer route, which I really like. I won't go into spoilers, but just a great ton of fun. game, and yeah, surprisingly coming from someone who doesn't even play Fire Emblem, but this was definitely one of my favorite games of all time.
I did think actually of two little I'm just gonna leave them as honorable mentions for Switch because they are indie games.
Yeah.
And one of them had been out for a considerably longer time on PC and Mac before getting its Switch port. So it basically is a port. But I'm just going to mention these two games briefly. The first one is the Red Lantern, which came out not that long ago, and it's basically the Oregon Trail, but you're a sled dog master, and you actually have there's like 8 different sled dogs, and you pick 4 of them, and they all have their own unique character arcs. It's actually really kind of cool. But just like the Oregon Trail, it's a game where you die a lot, and you just keep learning from your mistakes. But it is like kind of a nice little indie game that I would always recommend. And then the other one is Shelter Generations, which is actually a bundle of Shelter 2 and then a Shelter 2 spin-off called Pause. Pause isn't that good. Really, you're just getting it for Shelter 2. And Shelter 2 is a very simple indie game where you play as a mother lynx that has to raise her 4 kittens to adulthood. So you're basically spending, it takes like an hour or so for your kittens to fully mature in game. So you're just spending that time hunting hares, and if you can, catch a bird or a deer that gives more meat, all the more power to you, and just kind of avoiding predators. And I think it does include the mountains DLC, so there are like some more predators, like there's foxes, there's bears, I think even wildfires can happen. So it's just like, it's a nice little quaint game, and as an animal lover like myself, it's probably one of the best animal sims that I've played, because as a general rule, there's not a lot of animal games, and animal games tend to just not be that good, which I don't understand why, because I think that people would like to play more animal games, but there's not like a lot of like big AAA developers that have like very animal oriented games, and I think that's kind of a genre that is lacking, and there should be a studio that tries to take advantage of that.
I agree, yeah.
But yeah, so getting into my 2 picks, I think these are both probably pretty obvious. They both came out this year. First one is for the second pick is Monster Hunter Rise.
Yeah, of course.
Monster Hunter Rise is a great game. I feel like most of the pre-release hate was from people that started with World and were like, oh, this is on a Nintendo console, it's on a handheld, it should be on Xbox or PS4. And those are just people that just didn't have the background of the fact that previous to that, we had like 4 really good Monster Hunter games on the 3DS. And then we also had a ton of games on PSP, and those were the games that sold really well. So that wasn't really a valid criticism. I do think that there is a lack of endgame content. I'm not in the endgame yet, but I have seen what has been available, and I would agree that that is kind of Rise's weakest point. I think in terms of just progressing through the game, it is quite nice. It's not story intensive, but it is just kind of a nice way to progress through the game. And I haven't gotten to the final boss yet, but I am excited. That is kind of the most story-esque part of it, and I think it would be cool. I really love Komura Village as a hub. I think it's definitely one of my favorite hub areas. I think it's very nice and lively, and I enjoy it a lot. Palamutes are huge to me. As soon as I saw the Palamutes in the trailer, I was hooked. I was like, this is going to be a good game because we get rideable dogs that already look like Rapide. And yes, I did spend an extra hour in the dog customizer making mine look as close to Rapide as I possibly
I remember
could.
that. That was good. Mine's also named Rapide, by the way.
Yeah, so the Rapide doggos is great, and you still have the access to the Palicos as well. And then I like just some new adjustments that they gave to some of the weapons. Not Insect Glaive. Insect Glaive got worse in my opinion. I stopped using it. I don't use it in Rise. But Hunting Horn got a lot more offensive because your melodies will play as you're attacking. You don't have to hit a separate button to play your melodies. So it's a bit more offensive and active, and they did take away some certain abilities to compensate for that. Like you can no longer encore and things like that, and you just have less melodies per horn. But I still enjoy it quite a bit. Wyvern riding is interesting. I don't need it to be a mainstay, but I do like it. I think it's nice and interesting. But I definitely think I overall prefer the normal mounting system because you can do it multiple times in a hunt. And that's kind of the big weakness of Wyvern riding. And I don't want you to be able to Wyvern ride the same monster multiple times. I don't think that's very balanced. But I would like to see the normal mounting system make a return so that I could use Insect Glaive a little bit again. Wirebug's really interesting. I'm still kind of getting used to it, but it definitely makes the combat a lot faster, especially combined with the Palamutes, and much faster in a way that I haven't really been used to in a Monster Hunter game. So much to the point that I sometimes forget to use both of those features in the middle of a hunt to give myself some extra mobility, and that's definitely something that I need to remember as the hunts are getting harder and harder. I have Rathalos next in single player, and then I'll be taking on Mizutsune and Zinogre, and then it's kind of getting into that 6-star stuff. So I know I'm gonna be having another rematch with good old Pain Train Tigrex coming up soon, as well as Diablos, and Diablos was one of my first walls, as he is for a lot of people. But yeah, I know those ones are coming up, and I'm excited to fight a lot of the new monsters. I do like a lot of the new monsters. I think Great Azuchi is one of the better first monster fights. Aknasom is pretty cool design-wise. I mean, his fight's okay, but I really like his design. He's one of the few bird wyverns that looks like a bird fully and less like a dinosaur, which I enjoy. I love Tetranadon's design. Tetranadon is really cool, and we always need more amphibians. I'm excited for Rachna Kadaki because it's the first time we have a Temnoceran that isn't a Nursilla variant. And yeah, I love Magnamalo. He's a tough fight, but he's really, really cool, and I like him a lot. So I'm really glad that we had him as our flagship.
Yeah.
But yeah, Monster Hunter Rise, I would say, even despite the shortcomings with a lack of endgame content, I would say it's probably still my second favorite mainline Monster Hunter. I would say that I'm enjoying it more than 4 Ultimate, and I think that mostly has to do with quality of life improvements, but really, really good game.
Yeah, I would highly recommend. I've been playing Rise as well. I didn't really talk about it because I'm not far into it, but very good game. Great to play with friends, especially like Wildcat here.
Yeah, it's a game that's got a steep learning curve, so if you can have friends, it definitely helps. And I just think that part of it is also the PvE aspect of it. There's no PvP aspect to the game whatsoever. So it kind of makes the Monster Hunter community one of the nicest gaming communities, dare I say the nicest gaming community, because everybody just wants to help and support each other. And it's really, really refreshing from having been involved in other fandoms like Pokemon or Persona, where people can get really toxic towards each other. So I really love that about the Monster Hunter community.
That's good to hear, yeah. Alright, your number 1, I think I know what it is, but say it anyway.
Yep. My number 1 was announced immediately after Monster Hunter Rise, and you know, the Monster Hunter Rise announcement, I was very happy. I was like, oh, this is really, really cool. I just got World, but I'm excited that we have another one on the way. And it's on Switch, so it's 2 different platforms. And then immediately after that, Capcom hits us with a trailer for a game that I thought would never come out, and that was Monster Hunter Stories 2. Monster Hunter Stories, as much as I love that game, it was very much, I thought it was going to be a hidden gem. Because as I said, it didn't sell very well in the United States. It actually didn't even sell that well in Japan. Capcom didn't want to release it internationally, and Nintendo had to take the initiative to get it released internationally. Stories 1 only sold, I think, at least from what was recorded, 300,000 copies. To give a comparison, Stories 2 sold over 1 million copies in 2 weeks after it came out.
That's wild.
Stories 2 has been insanely popular, which is definitely due to Monster Hunter becoming mainstream thanks to World as well as Rise. I also would like to attribute a good chunk of it to
a lot of disgruntled Pokemon fans after Sword and Shield's release, because YouTube is littered with comparisons between Sword and Shield and Stories 2. And the funny thing is a lot of those people didn't even play Stories 1, and it's like, if you make comparisons between Sword and Shield and Stories 1, it's even more embarrassing because Stories 1 was on the 3DS. But Stories 2 is just mechanically, it takes everything good about Stories 1 and just makes it even better. It fully fleshes out the gene system. The gene system is not a pain to work with anymore, which makes you actually really want to build good gene sets. And I'm getting into PvP with Stories 2, and I'm really enjoying it. And so that's been just a kind of a huge time sink for me, is that I just want to farm genes for hours and just make some really good builds that I can use in PvP. And the nice thing with PvP in Monster Hunter Stories is that there are two types. There is the 1v1s, but Stories 2 has added 2v2 PvP, which is really fun because you can get a buddy that you're really familiar with and you get in a Discord call and you're fighting together and you're going over your strategy together as you fight, and you can do some really like cool combos and stuff. And I really enjoyed the 2v2 PvP system, and it's really, really fun. So that was nice. In terms of the actual single-player adventure, I think the story is definitely different from the first one. The first one, your kind of conflict is more of a natural phenomenon that's kind of occurring, whereas in Stories 2, there's something going on that's being caused by an individual monster, and you have to kind of go investigate, which is more akin to a lot of things that you see in mainline Monster Hunter conflicts. So they're both kind of different. I think I slightly like Stories 1's story a little bit more, just because it is more complete. It answers all your questions, and I'm not going to get into too many spoilers because I know Nova's going to play it soon.
Yes.
But there's some things with the end of Stories 2's story where there were certain characters that weren't used to the full extent, and the ending of their arcs kind of leaves you with more questions than answers. And I didn't like that because I liked the introduction of said characters, but they just weren't used to their fullest potential, and that was kind of sad for me. Battle Buddies was interesting, and I know that was because they were planning on doing a lot of two-player co-op and the 2v2 PvP stuff. But using the AI companions, honestly, I feel like that's kind of a disadvantage in a lot of fights. It definitely makes a lot of certain fights harder, and sometimes you have to wait for moments where you just don't have a battle buddy with you to get certain fights done, which I didn't really like. And I think battle buddies are also the reason why the battle pouch was removed from items, because you kind of have to use your own items to save your battle buddies a lot of the time. So they didn't want to have item limits in battle because of that. But overall, the game's definitely still really fun. It's still got those high quality animations. It just builds more on the combat system in Stories 1. I really like the addition of slashing, blunt, and piercing weapons doing different like damage multiplication based on which part of the monster you're targeting. That's really cool. I really enjoyed that, because that's actually a feature that you have in mainline Monster Hunter. And I really appreciated that addition. I think that, yeah, it was already a really good combat system, and they just kind of added a couple of extra elements that make it even more fun. I think there's like a couple of glaring flaws that you kind of start to see in PvP, but it doesn't really affect the overall gameplay and enjoyment of the game too much, so I'm not really going to go into it. I'm just trying to think. Obviously, there's a lot of recurring characters from Stories 1, so there are going to be like little snippets that I think will give you more of an enjoyment of Stories 2 if you play Stories 1 first. My boy Roberto is back. I love Roberto, and Roberto is great. He's probably the best battle buddy in the game. So he's really, really good. I think another downside compared to Stories 1, and I think this is just because there is like some elements where, even though it is a separate game, they want to reward the players that play the first game, so they won't explain certain things as much. they don't go too much into how the kinship stone functions in Stories 2, whereas the kinship stone is a very critical part of the story in Stories 1. And I really like the kinship stone because it is kind of an explanation for how the bond between rider and monster occurs and how it really works and how you can't really manipulate it. It has to be a genuine bond that both the rider and the monster share, and I really, really like that aspect of it. Also, just like Spectrobes, you as the hunter are fighting alongside your monster against, you know, these bigger threats. And that's just something that I really love in a monster collecting RPG. It shows that you are not a pushover and you really care about your monster because you're right in there in the fight with them. You know, just like mainline Monster Hunter, you get a use monster parts to upgrade your armor and your weapons. I actually kind of like it better because you need less parts to... You get the full armor set. I'm sure you've seen this, Nova, with the demo, but like you just get the full armor set and it's like a point system and different monster parts are worth more points.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I like that better than having to craft like the individual pieces and needing specific parts for each piece. It just makes the game quite a bit more enjoyable and less grind heavy in my opinion. But I guess that's because more of the grinding is focused on your actual monsties. But yeah, I really love kind of just the exploration. The game looks beautiful, very good cell shading. You know, the addition of the HD graphics just makes it really pop. Flying, they did a better job with flying because now you can adjust the altitude at which you're flying, and in the first game you were at a fixed altitude. The flying really gives me major How to Train Your Dragon vibes, and I just love it. It's a beautiful game. It's definitely game of the year for me, and it's probably, excluding Zoo Tycoon 2, which just has an insane amount of childhood nostalgia, it's probably my favorite video game of all time, and I highly recommend it for just about anybody that would enjoy turn-based combat or exploring a cool world with really cool monsters.
Well, yeah, that's quite convincing. So I'm playing Stories 2, which means Grandia, my favorite game.
Yep.
Yeah, well,
I'll get to it. It's on the radar.
Nah, I'm just teasing. I'm not Raptor. But yeah, that's exactly what Raptor said. He's like, yeah, you're playing this Devil Survivor Overclock game, which is his favorite game of all time. I did promise him, eventually.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing. He's like, I have to do either Nocturne or SMT4, and like SMT5 looks really interesting to me. But, like,
I can't wait for it.
Since it's not out yet.
Yeah, exactly.
That doesn't count. So I'm kind of like stalling a bit. I'm like, maybe wait until he starts SMT5 and is like, it's really good. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely gonna play SMT5 for sure.
Oh yeah. Can't wait.
But yeah, that and then I'm gonna get the new Mario Party when that comes out in October. So,
yeah.
We're just gonna get some stuff for sure. Definitely nothing that I see overtaking Rise or Stories 2, but the Switch definitely has a future ahead of itself, which is really nice to see because, you know, obviously the Wii U kind of ended quickly, and that kind of caused the 3DS to end quickly. But the Switch is really going strong, and, you know, it's still outselling the other major consoles.
Yeah, Switch, very good console. It's great. Like, me saying I didn't really have much, I actually enjoyed getting all the games that, like, I used to play, like all the Final Fantasies on my Switch. I just have such a good library for it. It's such a great console. So convenient, too, so very, very neat. And,
very good.
Yeah. But anyway, that's gonna end this video. This was actually an hour and 29 minutes, which is perfect. I did not want this to go over an hour and a half. So, this worked out beautifully.
Perfect.
So, yeah, perfect indeed. This was longer than the other parts, but again, it was necessary because I did not want to have one part, which was just one or two consoles. So this was the most balanced we could make it. That's going to end this series. I hope you guys all enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun to do. It was really fun to get together with my boy Wildcat and talk about video games.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. And this is not the end. We'll do tons of other stuff together. I don't know specifically, but we're thinking of other ideas, like either games we played, series, like a tier list together. There's lots of ideas, and you,
Yeah,
the comments.
characters, Pokemon designs. I know we've thought of a couple things, but we'll probably
Yeah.
take a break for a bit just because
Yeah.
this was 4 parts.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm gonna like, I part 2 went up today, so I'm actually I'm waiting like 3 days to upload part 3, and I'm gonna space these out a bit. But yeah, anyway, so it was a great time, and you, the comments, can also let us know if you want us to do anything, and we'll be doing more stuff in the future. So I hope you all look forward to whatever rankings or tier lists come next, either from just me or me with someone else. So we'll see what happens. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.
Yep, stay classy.